Hey folks, today's episode is going to be great. We're going to talk about Michael Irvin's $100 million lawsuit. It's a really interesting lawsuit, and as always, you're going to learn about the Constitution, discovery laws, evidence laws, jurisdiction, and everything by going over this lawsuit that Michael Irvin filed against the Marriott Hotel. Welcome back, my friends. I had to take a week off of the podcast because I was away in San Jose for a legal case, and now I'm back. So I missed you folks for a week, and I'm happy to be back. All right, so let's jump into it. Michael Irvin, star football player, Hall of Famer, he has 3 Super Bowl rings, and those 3 Super Bowl rings, he contributed a lot to get those rings. You know, he wasn't just on the team.
Fake on first down. There's a pump going deep to Michael Irvin and Michael Zordich.
He grew up in the Miami area. He was born 1966. 17 children. Okay. He was the 15th of 17 kids. That's a lot of kids, huh? 17 kids. And he had an interesting childhood, you know, in his memoirs and interviews. I mean, they were poor. He remembers things like when he would eat cereal, he would put water in there instead of milk. You know, like his shoes didn't fit him, and God, it was just a disaster in some aspects, right? At least financially. So anyway, and then he went to the University of Miami Hurricanes, and they won a national championship while he was there. Okay, the Miami Hurricanes, and then got drafted by the Cowboys, and you know, amazing football player, and then. After his football career, he did very well, Michael Irvin, as a commentator. And, you know, unlike a lot of NFL players that, you know, after their career, you know, they try different businesses. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You know, this guy, Michael Irvin, busted his butt and has been doing really, really good. All right. And then this crazy thing happened that's the, you know, facts of why we're here. You know, this $100 million lawsuit. In this past Super Bowl in February 2023, he went to the Phoenix and stayed at a Marriott, and he was going to cover the Super Bowl as a commentator for the NFL, and you know and on ESPN. I mean, he's a big shot commentator. People love Michael Irvin, right? He's got a great personality. He's a great commentator. You know, a Hall of Famer, amazing football player, right? And Something happened, and the Marriott Hotel, one of their managers calls the NFL and says that one of their female employees alleged that Michael Irvin was acting inappropriately. And that was the extent of it. I mean, inappropriate. Did his credit card bounce? I don't know, you know, but inappropriately, okay, is all they said. And then the NFL straight fired him. No explanation, no opportunity for him to defend himself, you know, and the NFL is within their rights because in the contract that they have with their commentators and their employees, ordinarily it says, even if it's an allegation, even if you're not proven guilty, even blah, 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 we're allowed to fire you just by, you know, someone picking up the phone call and saying this guy was being inappropriate, okay? So he doesn't really have a case against the NFL, right? Now, he denies any sort of wrongdoing. In fact, he said that this has baffled him. He said that when he checked in to the Marriott, right before he went to his room, there were some fans out there, and he kind of, you know, they wanted to take a picture with him. He took a picture with them, and he, like, you know, the people that were greeting him and whatnot, he, like, shook their hands and then went upstairs and went to sleep. And when he woke up, like, he was fired, okay? And then coincidentally, some witnesses came forward, and the witnesses who don't know Michael Irvin and, you know, don't work for the Marriott or anything like that, they said the same story that he said. In fact, they had footage of it. Like, he was taking pictures with some fans, and, you know, some people wanted to meet him. He said hello, he shook their hands, and he went upstairs, and they thought he was just the nicest guy and everything was cool. So, you know, we don't know yet what happened exactly, right? And that's why there's this lawsuit. Right? We will find out. All right. And what I'm here to do is to kind of explain how this is going to work out. I mean, a $100 million lawsuit, which, by the way, as a plaintiff lawyer, right, us plaintiff lawyers, this, can you imagine winning $100 million? Like ordinarily the plaintiff's lawyers, they take these cases on what's called a contingency, meaning they may take like 40% of it. So if they were to get $100 million, that's $40 million, right? Obviously, that's a career-changing moment, right? And the Marriott, they have shareholders and big-time financiers, okay? So they're definitely not in the business of writing out checks, all right? The only way the Marriott is going to write him a check for anything other than comping his room, okay, would be if a judge orders them or if they are convinced that they would lose in court. Then they would settle and write him a check. That's the only two ways. You know, I had one case, listen to this. I had a case against an airline over something like there was like one of their employees was hitting on a passenger and the passenger was my client, but it was more than, it was kind of weird. He like got her phone number from a little tag on her luggage or something. And then he started texting her and all that. Anyway, long story short, that airline, their first offer was the following. They said, we will comp her airline tickets, meaning they'll just pay back the $400 or whatever it was she paid, you know, and we had to go from that to, you know, getting a check, as I call it, you know, like we ended up settling the case after a freaking federal lawsuit, but we did settle the case because at some point they were convinced, a court will rule against us potentially. So let's just settle this. Okay. So that's what's going on here. Let's see the steps that it's going to take to do that. Now, first things first, Michael Irving sued the Marriott in the state court in Texas, okay, in Dallas. Michael Irving is beloved in the Dallas area. Just they love him. I mean, he won Super Bowls, an amazing player, you know, all of the above. You know where they hate Michael Irving? In Phoenix, Arizona, okay? Because Phoenix, Arizona, back then when he played, the Phoenix Cardinals, they were called the Phoenix Cardinals, then they were called the Arizona Cardinals, which is what they're called now. They were in the NFC East, as was Dallas, which I think is kind of crazy, right? Because Phoenix and Dallas are both not in the East Coast, but they were both in the NFC East division. And Michael Irving would just scorch the Cardinals. I mean, it was like varsity playing against JV type of thing. I mean, he scorched them all the time. They hate his guts in Phoenix. So sure enough, he wants that lawsuit to proceed in Texas, right? Especially in the Dallas area. So he files his lawsuit in the Dallas area in the state court of Texas. And the first order of business, jurisdiction, okay? This is going to be the first big fight. And it's already started, the jurisdiction fight, okay? So here's how I want to explain this. Now, for the law students out there and, you know, for young lawyers and even, you know, practicing lawyers and people that are interested in law, this whole thing about jurisdiction is all, you know, almost always the first order of business. And it's going to be, this is like a make it or break it in this particular case. Because if he has to handle this case in Phoenix as opposed to Dallas, it's going to be, you know, he's going to have he's not going to have home field advantage, right? So the way it works is this, okay? In every case in jurisdiction, you need two things. And I wish when I was in law school at Berkeley, I wish they just explained it in a way that made sense. Instead, they kind of explained it in this like philosophical, you know, constitutional law way. And, you know, anyway, I like to break it down where it's a little bit more, you know, understandable. Okay. So so jurisdiction, you need two things. You need personal jurisdiction and you need subject matter jurisdiction. I hate the term subject matter jurisdiction. It could have just been subject jurisdiction, but they insisted on calling it subject matter jurisdiction. Okay. I hate any unneeded words, okay? Just kind of like the last 50 words I just said. All right, so here we go. So you need both. That's why I put that little ampersand there. You need personal jurisdiction and subject matter jurisdiction. So the personal jurisdiction goes like this. The Marriott, you need the personal jurisdiction over the plaintiff and the defendant. just by fact that the plaintiff filed the lawsuit, then there's always personal jurisdiction over the plaintiff. You also need personal jurisdiction over the defendant. Marriott is incorporated in Delaware, and what's their principal place of business is in Maryland. So for corporations, they have two potential states of residency, it's called, and for Marriott, it would be Maryland and Delaware. That's their citizenship. Okay. Then for personal jurisdiction, you can get them in those two states, and you can get them in anywhere they do, it's called minimum contacts. Like they have a prevailing business or prevailing contacts or prevailing work in that state. And indeed, there's a ton of Marriotts in the state of Texas. So therefore, the state court in Texas has personal jurisdiction over the Marriott. There's been a lot of cases, and this is a constitutional issue. If the defendant doesn't have those minimum contacts in that state, even if the state says, you could have personal jurisdiction over anyone in the whole world and you could sue them in the state, even if they do that, there's a federal limit on what the states can reach, and that is this personal jurisdiction. So that, for example, I have never been in, let me think of a state that I have never, ever been to. I have never been to Louisiana, okay? I want to go there someday, okay? And anyways, I've never been there. So if somebody sues me and they live in Louisiana and they sue me, I don't know, let's say they have a podcast and I'm copying their podcast, right? So they sue me for copyright infringement and they sue me in Louisiana. Even if Louisiana allows it, there's a federal limit. It's a constitutional limit. And the state of Louisiana does not have reach over Joe Samo, a citizen in California. And that's the kind of the separation of the states type of thing. Okay. So that's why every single case, state case, federal case, you have to have personal jurisdiction to sue that entity in the state. And the subject matter. Okay. The subject matter jurisdiction is this. In a state court, you can't have subjects like immigration or federal bankruptcy laws, federal crimes. The state court does not have subject matter for that, okay? So anyway, this case, Michael Irving can sue the Marriott in Texas because he has personal jurisdiction over Marriott, and it's a tort law claim. It's not like an immigration claim or a bankruptcy claim. So he could sue them in state court in Texas. Boom, boom, boom. That's not where it ends. It's not over yet.
Nothing is over. Nothing.
The defendant has the right to remove the case and then try to have it changed from one jurisdiction to another. And that is what Marriott is trying to do now. Okay, what they did is this. They asked the federal court to remove it from the state court to the federal court. If a federal court has jurisdiction over a case, and simultaneously a state court has jurisdiction over the case, the defendant can elect to make the federal court hear the case. And the reason why that's the case, it's not, I've always thought, I'm like, man, wouldn't the federal court just prefer not to have the case? Because then, less busy work? No, they obviously want more cases, right? Because then there's more power when they have the authority to adjudicate a case, okay? So if the case can go in both federal and state court, if the defendant wants it, the federal court will prevail. All right. And so here, the Marriott wants the case removed to the federal court. So we kind of do that same thing. We say, okay, is there jurisdiction? There is personal jurisdiction in the federal court because Marriott does work in Texas. So a federal court in the state of Texas has personal jurisdiction over the Marriott. Then the subject matter jurisdiction. In law school, what I'm about to tell you took about a semester to for some reason it took so long for them to explain it, but it's kind of an easy thing now that I think about it. Okay, you have to have subject matter jurisdiction in that federal court. A federal question means if there's a lawsuit over the First Amendment or a Fifth Amendment issue, or if it's some sort of Civil Rights Act of 1964, some sort of federal law, that would give you subject matter jurisdiction. And then there's that word or what's called diversity jurisdiction. And diversity jurisdiction just means the citizens are from different states and the lawsuit is over the amount of $75,000. That's what this case is. It's remember when I went over that the citizenship. Michael Irving is a citizen of Texas. Marriott is a citizen of Maryland and Delaware. So as you can see, the plaintiff and the defendant are citizens of different state. And obviously he's suing for $100 million. That's over the threshold. So the federal court has what's called diversity jurisdiction. So therefore, the federal court has personal jurisdiction and subject matter jurisdiction. So Marriott just filed to remove it from the state court and federal court. The Joe Samo prediction is Marriott will win. All right. They're going to be able to remove it. All right. Boom, 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 boom. Then this is the fun part about federal court. There is this other issue. It's called forum non-conveniens. Okay. What this is kind of a funny rule. You could have this lawsuit proceed in Texas. You could have it proceed in Maryland. You could have it proceed in Delaware. And you could also have it proceed in Arizona, right? Because in Arizona, Marriott is located there. They have a lot of hotels there. All of these alleged facts happened there in Arizona, right? So you could have this. Michael Irving could have filed this in Arizona, or he could have filed this in Texas. So now the federal courts, the law is the following, okay? If the case can proceed in different states, in a federal court in different states, if it's more convenient to have the case proceed in one court over the other, then you could have the case moved to that other court, okay? This is the law of forum non-conveniens, all right? And the theory here is if the witnesses, the facts, the kind of the people, if it's just more convenient to have the case heard in another state, especially for third-party witnesses, right? If it's more convenient, then the defendant could move it from one place to another and prevail, all right? So the Marriott, what they have to do is two things. They remove it from the state court to the federal court, which they will win. Then they remove it from the federal court in Texas to the federal court in Arizona. The theory, what they'll file is this motion saying that it's going to be more convenient to have it in Phoenix because the Marriott employees are located in Phoenix. Any witnesses, were at least there temporarily in Phoenix. The Super Bowl was in the Phoenix area, right? And all that jazz. So that it's more convenient to have it there. Not for Michael Irving, but for everyone else, right? I predict they will win that motion, okay? So they will win. They'll win that. So that's going to hurt Michael Irving's case because all of everything I just talked about, this is what drove me crazy, by the way, as a law student, is that have we yet discussed the case? Like the actual facts of the case? No, we've been talking about jurisdiction this whole time because in legal cases, what makes or breaks a legal case a lot of times and what separates the big shot lawyers, is winning these and analyzing these jurisdictional things correctly. I think his lawyer should have just filed it in Phoenix from the outset. Like, why mess around and make this delay happen? Because now it's just going to delay the case. And they're going to get it. They're going to win. It's pretty clear, right? So anyway, whatever. It is what it is. But I predict, I guess some lawyers will say, why, Joe Samo? There is a 5% chance that we could win that forum non-convenience and the case will stay in the Dallas area. I guess there is that tiny chance. Like what do they say in Dumb and Dumber? Remember that line? Like, so you're saying there's a chance, right? I guess there's a chance. Okay, whatever. Okay. I don't think it's worth it. I think they should have filed it there. So now this is going to be a ginormous loss for Michael Irving, okay, when the case will be moved to Arizona. Now, the journalists, they made a big error. They were saying recently, Michael Irving scored a big victory in this. The judge ordered Marriott to hand over certain documents and videotapes and the name of the employee that complained about him, okay? That was a premature article to say that Michael Irving scored a victory because what happened was he filed his case in the Texas court. Then his lawyers did a rush motion for discovery, meaning what they asked the judge in the Texas state court, they said, Your Honor, we really need quickly. We need all the videotape recordings of all the time Michael Irving was in the hotel. We need the information of all the employees that were working that day. And we need the information of the employee that complained about him. And we need, let's see, provide a name, the contact information of any and all employees or managers who contacted the NFL and who called the NFL to snitch or complain about Michael Irving. We want to know that person's name, okay? And we want to know who on the NFL side answered the phone call and talked to them. So the state court ordered Marriott to give all that information by February 20, 2023. All right. So all the journalists, there were all these articles saying Michael Irving scored a victory. No, he did not, because then they filed this motion to remove the case from the state court to the federal court. As soon as they file that, there's a stay of all the orders until the federal court makes a decision if the case can be removed. So all of those, everything the state court judge said is currently stayed, meaning there's no authority now because there's that pending case in the federal court. And then if the federal court rules that it can be removed there, then anything the state court judge said will be thrown out the window. Why? Because the federal court, like I always say, because the North won the Civil War, right? So the federal government has higher authority than the state government, okay? So all of those rulings are now on hold. I think that he'll eventually be able to get that, but it's going to take a little bit longer because he's got to get that through the federal court in Arizona later. Okay, now that we could finally talk about the flipping case, okay? What the heck is going on here? So Michael Irving was at the hotel, and the allegation is that he acted inappropriately. And then this Marriott employee complained to a manager. The manager called the NFL. The NFL fired him. All right, and now he's suing for $100 million. There's two things that have to happen here for Michael Irving to win. He has to prove the two things is he has to have liability and then the damages. Liability means they screwed up, right? And as long as they screwed up, then he has to prove, well, how much is it worth? Is it worth $1 million? Is it worth $10 million? Is it worth $100 million? What I always say is if you prove liability, then you're going to get a check. The only question is how much will that check be, right? So the liability part, here's the substantive issue here. It's going to be kind of a weird case because, what I said to some colleagues of mine, if the allegation was simply he acted inappropriately, like what the heck does that mean? It's almost an opinion, like I could say, you folks acted inappropriately, the freaking air conditioning isn't like cold enough. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. This table is a tiny bit swiggly, or whatever. I think that's inappropriate. It's almost a catch-22. Like he met with everyone, that the fans and then whatever, and like people wanted to meet him. He like shook everyone's hand or something. For all we know, that employee thought it was inappropriate for him to shake her hand. I don't know, or maybe there was more to it. I have no idea. Okay. But nonetheless, if it's, what the heck does that mean inappropriate? If a judge or jury thinks that, that's kind of just an opinion, then shucks, like he may lose the whole case on that, because the rule for defamation and that type of thing is this. If somebody states an opinion, like if someone says, Joe Sammo's podcast is inappropriate for people to listen to, right? That's an opinion, right? It's inappropriate for people to listen to. Okay. So I cannot sue that person for defamation, even if, then my podcast gets pulled from YouTube or something, I can't sue them. I can't sue them and win because, it was their opinion that my podcast is inappropriate for people to listen to, right? Now, if they state some sort of fact like, Joe Sammo stole my car yesterday, you know what I'm saying? And I didn't steal a car yesterday, all right? So they say Joe Sammo stole my car yesterday, and that's a complete falsehood. Then I have a good claim. Do you see what I'm saying? Because that's like a clear fact that they alleged that I could prove is incorrect. So the first thing he has to do is he has to prove that he acted appropriately and that it was clear he acted appropriately and no reasonable person would have thought otherwise. Okay, so that's kind of a high hurdle. If it's true that all he did was say hello to fans and like was nice at the hotel, lobby, and he was only there for a minute, like the witnesses alleged, the independent witnesses that kind of interviewed with journalists said that he was just there hanging out. If that's true, and then he just kind of was nice to everyone, and then the people that came up to him, he just shook their hand, and then he went upstairs. If that's the case, I think he will win on liability, because I cannot imagine anybody thinking that that would be inappropriate. Do you see what I'm saying? So I think he will win on liability. Now, the damages, we call it. This one in law, there have been cases that it'll go on for years debating the issue of damages. And this is what I mean by that. First, it's, okay, if he gets past liability, should he get $1 million or 10 million or 100 million, you know, whatever, right? What's going to happen here is if he gets past all this, then there could be these issues of evidence. What that means, when I say evidence in law, evidence means like what is allowed to be admitted to the jury and what is not allowed to be admitted, okay? Or, you know, what's admissible, what's inadmissible, all right? So let me kind of explain. Michael Irving has a eventful past, okay? And this is what I mean. So in 1996, there was a young lady that alleged that he and a teammate like raped her at gunpoint, okay? And it was obviously a big deal. Then it was just shown that she made it, like she confessed to making it up. She confessed to it being a false police report. She confessed that, you know, she did the whole thing just to either try to get money. It was the worst thing imaginable. Like somebody would make up that, right? And then she even went to jail. Like it was so bad. Like she went to jail over this because it was like something like he wasn't even there with her. You know, it was that like egregious of a lie and just made up story. Okay. So there's always like, okay, there was that. Then in 1998, this is a true story. This was not made up. This was kind of, you know, he was at a barber shop with some teammates. And when one teammate wouldn't let him go in front of him or something, Michael Irving like grabbed a pair of barber scissors and stabbed the guy, you know, in the neck of all places. Thankfully, the guy was okay. But it was kind of hush hush because it came out later, like Jerry Jones, the owner of the Cowboys at the time, or he still is, he like brokered a deal where they kind of settled it kind of quietly. But anyway, interesting. The reason why I'm saying these stories is if that story goes to the jury, then the jury will most likely be less inclined to give Michael Irving a lot of money. Do you see what I'm saying? So a lot of times the battle in these cases before, you know, like somebody the other day asked me like, oh, when you're in front of the judge, like, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I told them, I go, you know what, 99% of the case is all decided before there's even a trial. Like if, you know, if I'm representing the Marriott, for example, and these stories I win and they could come in, you know, it's going to like hurt Michael Irving's case. Maybe they'll settle for a lot lower, you know, or take their chances and I'd have a better chance. Do you see what I'm saying? In 2001, he was arrested for a cocaine possession. No charges were filed, but he was arrested. There was a mugshot, you know, all that. Obviously, you know, if this case does go to trial and there's no settlement, the Marriott would love to have the jury know about that whole incident. Do you see what I'm saying? And Michael Irving would want to get that whole thing, you know, inadmissible. I think it would be inadmissible because there's no charges filed. And usually something over 10 years ago, like a criminal act over 10 years ago, it's usually the law is pretty clear that they don't like those things to be admitted. 2007, there was a lawsuit against him that he sexually assaulted a woman, and it was at a hotel in Miami area, the same one that Anna Nicole Smith passed away in. It was actually called Fort Lauderdale, Miami. All right. So, and then there was a settlement in that case, an undisclosed amount. Obviously, that would be a big deal if that can come in. So that's another kind of debate in terms of like, is that admissible? Is that not admissible? And then 2017, there was another sexual assault allegation. in 2017 against him, and then that one was ultimately dropped, okay? In law school, I didn't realize how, when I took evidence class, okay, it was kind of like, I remember thinking, okay, well, here's the rule, and this is hearsay, and this is, inadmissible, blah, blah, blah. And it wasn't until I started practicing law that I realized, oh, wow, a lot of these things, like, we will win or lose just based on this, like if the jury hears about that 2017 allegation, then the jury might say, whoa, like, maybe it's true. Or like there's a lot of jurors that say something like, you know what, I'm as old as Michael Irving and nobody has alleged I've done that because I've never done that, And so he's got a few allegations of that. Maybe he did do something inappropriate, or maybe the way he shook her hand or looked at her, or freaking maybe he stuck out his tongue in a weird, I don't know. But what I'm saying is anything that goes to the jury, lawyers are very particular about what the jury could hear, what they could not hear. All right. Now, I'll tell you what is admissible is how much money he's freaking making, and how much money he's going to be losing over this, right? If his career takes a big hit over this, or if the NFL never rehires him, and if he does get past that liability, then I think his case is worth many millions of dollars, right? Because, assuming he wins on liability, those type of things will come into play. Like, if it's true she lied and she made it up and nobody would think that what he did was inappropriate, and if he doesn't get this contract back with the NFL, that would be admissible. The other things that would be admissible would be things like, what's the trajectory of his career now? He's a young guy, he's 56. He, maybe had another 20 years of working for the NFL as a commentator, blah, blah, blah. If all of that is lost, or if it's going to take him several years to get back into it, all of that is kind of analyzed, right? And then the jury would ultimately hear what happened. And then all of these things about what changes are going to be in his career, this and that. And then they would make a decision on how much to give him. All right. Here's the Joe Samo prediction. Everyone ready? This is what I think is going to happen. The case will go to Phoenix, and then they'll conduct discovery, and then they'll interview, or they call it a deposition of that employee. It'll happen, okay? And then the manager that snitched or called the NFL or whatever you want to call it, I think that'll happen. I think, this is my gut feeling, this is my guess, I think that some things will be kind of tough for the Marriott, meaning, maybe the manager should have inquired more. Maybe the manager should have had more detail. Maybe there should have been a written statement before he called the NFL, blah, 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 right? I have this gut feeling that the Marriott didn't follow everything like very, very well. And then I think there's going to be a settlement for an undisclosed amount because the Marriott will worry that all of these big things will come in. The bummer about all this is I predict there's going to be a settlement, and I predict it's going to be an undisclosed amount. I do not think the Marriott will get the case completely dismissed. Sometimes they can go to the judge, call a motion for summary judgment, saying this is so obvious that we did everything correctly and he effed up, that we should get this thrown out and without a jury trial. I don't think that'll happen. I think there'll be a settlement, and I definitely do not think there will ultimately be a trial. Because if it gets that far, then something bad happened that the Marriott did, and they will want to settle this and cover it up. That's my prediction. I predict it'll settle for $12 million. That's the Joe Samo number that I predict. I don't know. We'll see. Time will tell. All right, guys, it was great to see you. I love being here, and I look forward to seeing you next week.